Hello and welcome. You're watching us here on a special episode of the Startup Street. I'm Mangalam Maloo, and today we have exciting conversations lined up as we delve into how Dream Sports is catalyzing India's transformation into a multi-sports ecosystem. In a country where cricket has long reigned supreme, we know that we're witnessing a remarkable shift towards a diverse sport culture. And Dream Sports is actually at the heart of this transformation. So joining us today are three distinguished guests. Why are they distinguished? I'll tell you. Because one, we have Vikrant Mudaliar, who's the Chief Marketing Officer at Dream Sports. Secondly, we have Monish Shah, founder and CEO of DreamSetGo. And then we have Yannick Colaco, who's the co-founder of FanCode. These industry leaders will share their insights on how technological advancements, digital engagement, and strategic initiatives, as well as renowned sport partnerships, are driving the growth of various sports beyond cricket. We'll also explore the evolution of India's sports fandom and the increasing demand for diverse sport experiences and the role of Dream Sports in fostering this community upliftment. Thanks a lot, gentlemen, for joining in. In fact, as we speak, fan engagement has enhanced beyond Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities as well, and it creates unique sports travel experiences. Dream Sports is actually paving the way for a multi-sports ecosystem. So let's dive straight into this conversation. Let's talk about the evolution of India's sporting fandom, so to say. You go first. Talk about how do you think this has evolved? What are the drivers for the same? And more importantly, where does this go from here?
Thank you, Mangalam. I think you made a reference to it in terms of India being a cricket-obsessed nation and therefore almost like a single sport nation. And anybody would have assumed that the conversation when it comes to sport would be around cricket.
Right.
But what's heartening to note, and Dream Sports has had a sort of front side seat of the way the sports landscape and fandom has evolved over the last 10 years or so. So one I think is very clearly is the emergence of the non-cricket sports fan.
Right.
Dream Sports, for example, very often people don't realize this, offers 12 sports, besides just cricket. I'm sure cricket is by far the most popular one. But I think this uptake and this appetite for non-cricket sports is a healthy sign of the whole sports fandom ecosystem. You can be a sports fan in this country without being a cricket fan. Yeah, right. There are multiple sports that you can follow. I think India doing well at the global level or even at the Asian level has meant that that kind of fan following for other sports has also evolved. The second, I think, landmark shift that has happened over the last decade is what one can probably refer to as the emergence of this digital sports fan.
Right.
So much of sports consumption, sports content consumption is now happening digitally. Again, Dream 11 and is a fantasy sports app and is completely digital. Our 220 million users consume and engage with the app only on digital. There's a lot which has happened in the ecosystem which has benefited not just sports fans but also other industries, whether it's fintech or e-commerce. This could be the mobile handset penetration in the country, cheap subscription data plans, the ease of doing financial transactions. A lot of that has meant that so much of sports content right now is being consumed online. And I think it would be unfair to say that the current modern digital sports fan in India actually is a digital sports fan. So that's the other bit that, at DreamSport also we have noticed happen over the years.
Just off the cuff, you said 220 million users. I'm not sure of any other platform which is post-liberalization India which actually has 220 million users, which is an Indian company. Would you know of any?
Well, you will struggle. There are a few, but I think none of them obviously in sports.
Yeah.
Very often we forget that Dream 11 is not, we now know it is actually the world's largest fantasy sports platform.
Wow.
Not just India's largest fantasy sports platform. So you're right, in terms of just size and scale, India, thanks to its demographic dividend, as we call it, in terms of just the sheer population and the numbers that we have. If you're talking about 600 million sports fans in the country, Dream 11 has 200 million of those.
That's a third of them.
Yeah, so we still believe there's headroom for growth. But I think the related point around things which have changed around when we talk about numbers and populations, also this emergence of what used to be an India sports fan, and now you have a Bharat sports fan, which really is sports fans in Tier 2, Tier 3 and Tier 4 cities. Again, linked to the previous point I made about how digital, sports fans consumption has gone up. has meant that they have their own likes and an appetite for consumption.
And they're pretty vocal about
yes,
that as well. So,
and sports such as what very often is called an Indian or local sport, such as kabaddi, for example, has great following in a lot of the tier 2, tier 3 towns, including obviously cricket as well. So I think the emergence of sports fans from smaller towns, Bharat sports fans as we like to call them, is another thing which is I think is only progressing. Even at Dream 11, for example, there is no single one town or city which has double-digit contribution in terms of the user base. Very often when you start off, a lot of digital brands are urban in terms of the skew that they have as far as the users are concerned. That's no longer true for Dream 11. That's no longer true for a lot of other digital platforms and brands as well.
Pretty broad-based, so to say. So let's ask Yannick about the long tail sports that we have beyond cricket. So if you look at India, there would be cricket at the peak, and there's a very long tail of all the other sports that he spoke about, be it the Indian sports or be it Bharat sports or some international sports as well.
Right.
How has that evolution come about as per what you've seen in FanCode?
So I think one of the key things that you look at in India over the last decade or so is that young India has very clearly built a very strong affiliation to sport. So you see a lot of young kids today playing sport and following sport across various formats, right? Whether it is obviously cricket is the most popular sport, but there are a whole lot of other sports with football, motor racing, kabaddi, volleyball, hockey, which have got a tremendous amount of following. And the reality is that for any sport to grow, what is really important is access and engagement.
Right.
Access is something which is critical. If you actually think about how a young fan gets exposed to a sport and he actually becomes a fan, its first thing is the ability to watch the game live.
Right.
Watch these stories of competition, winning, losing, this athletic kind of endeavor, which you've never seen before. Watch that live and be able to then build some affiliation to it. So access to that live sports content is something we actually set up FanCode to solve. Because while obviously the big cricket events got a lot of exposure and everyone had access to, most other sport didn't have great access, sports fans didn't have great access to it in India. So as we kind of build FanCode, we've now done we have over 20,000 live matches across 10 sports. We continue to provide more access of this to sports fans across the country, across various sports, from kabaddi, which is more popular in tier 2 and tier 3 towns, to like motorsport, and Formula 1, which has 60 million fans across the country. Providing that access is essentially what's going to help build the sports ecosystem in this country. And when you look at the contribution both from an access and engagement perspective, that's where we as a group, Dream Sports, comes together, which is access on FanCode, engagement through fantasy sport. How do you actually build that fan profile across the sport and build engagement around it?
So let's go to the third and the most important part of this entire tripod that we're talking about. One is access, and engagement through the fantasy part of it. The other one is by watching the events that are streamed on FanCode. And why just watch, go ahead and buy merchandise as well, so you feel that game. But eventually it boils down to, traveling to the game experience, and that's where DreamSetGo comes in. So, we speak to a lot of these tourism companies, and they're saying that in India, two kinds of tourism are now picking up. One is spiritual tourism, the other one is sports tourism. We saw that in the Cricket World Cup, but we are also seeing an increasing number of people attending sports events beyond cricket, not just in India, but in the entire world as well. What do you think have been the key factors driving this? And secondly, how big is this mass of people who are traveling? At what rate is it growing?
I mean, if you're looking at outbound tourism on an annual basis, is growing at around 10% CAGR.
Right.
Sports tourism is growing at 17.5% CAGR,
Wow.
which means there's a huge demand. It's growing at a much faster pace. As the millennials and the number of millennials within the country is increasing, they are wanting experiences over ownership. And we've seen that post-COVID. We've seen huge demand for young families wanting to have experiences to travel to international locations to watch sporting events live, and then have a sport experience which goes beyond the game as well. So there's a huge growing demand for families, corporates, groups to want experiences which is like watch the first team train, go pitch side, meet and greet with legends, getting a private tour of the stadium with a legend,
Wow.
Experiences otherwise which were categorized as money can't buy experiences and previously seen as probably a one-off experience that only the ultra HNI used to get. Now we're seeing an increasing demand from all sets of our target audiences wanting to go beyond the grave.
Well, I'll hold you on to that. In fact, I'll discuss my travel plans with you during the break. Until then, Vikrant, Yannick, Monish, just take a pause. We'll come back, continue our engaging discussion on the other side. Stay tuned until then. Welcome back. You're watching us here on this special episode of Startup Street. We're discussing how Dream Sports is catalyzing India's transformation into a multi-sports ecosystem. I have with me Vikrant, Monish, and Yannick as well. Yannick, we were talking about, how you stream about 20,000 sporting events on FanCode. I'm curious to know how much of that is cricket and what are the other sports? What are the more popular other sports that we're talking about here?
So we actually started with, when we started 5 years back, we said that the access problem that we spoke about is also in cricket, right? In women's cricket, under 19 cricket, domestic cricket, a lot of global events which weren't getting covered. So we actually started with only cricket, non-tier 1 sort of cricket events. And now we're at a split where over 50% of our coverage is actually for non-cricket events. And we're seeing that as you provide more and more access, especially to younger kids, the popularity of it keeps growing. So sports like football, basketball, volleyball, handball, hockey, and obviously kabaddi have grown immensely in terms of fan engagement. One of the things that people don't realize is that obviously this Pro Kabaddi League, which started years back and galvanized the entire kabaddi ecosystem, so to say. We are streaming an event called Yuva Kabaddi, which is another level which happens throughout the year, which has had tremendous amount of success outside of metro and tier one towns. So it's in tier 2, tier 3. When you actually look at a sport like motorsport, and Formula One's also on our platform, that sees a tremendous amount of coverage in metros in tier 1. So there's this entire amalgamation of sports fans which come on our platform. And for us, the challenge remains on how do you make sure that the right content goes to the right user at the right point of time.
I have to ask you this, Monish, because when we think of people traveling to sporting events, etc., it seems like a very metro phenomenon. What is your mix of clientele? How much of them come from metros? What are the backgrounds of people who avail your services?
So we're actually seeing a huge rise in demand from the tier 2 cities.
Got it.
Last year we saw a lot of clients from Chandigarh, Raipur, Jaipur, Mohali, and in fact for Wimbledon last year, which is one of our most expensive products because these the debenture tickets, the hospitality tickets are very expensive, and the overall
How expensive
package,
typically?
I mean, they range, the hospitality tickets for semi-finals and finals are in the range of 4,500 to 5,500 pounds.
Wow.
And we saw the highest number of turnaround of the clients that we took for the Wimbledon was from Rajasthan, and Jaipur leading the way. So, as the disposable income is rising, the upper middle class is rising, we're seeing that metros is not only the target audience that we have, our audience is actually spread across India. And our typical target audience is corporates and high net worth individuals, and then just very passionate sports fans, which are upper middle class that can afford to travel for these experiences.
How is Dream Sports integrating this entire experience and taking, sport beyond cricket, growing it across the country?
Yeah. So actually, Dream Sports is in a very unique position in the sense that we have a very synergistic, symbiotic relationship with sport. Dream Sports' vision is to make sports better. What's good for sports is good for Dream Sports in general. So I think it comes with that little bit of onus and responsibility to look beyond your own business model and your individual businesses to see what more can we do to try and improve the status of the sports ecosystem in the country. So for the sports fan, if you are interested in fantasy sports, there's Dream 11.
Yeah.
And hopefully we're turning passive sports fans into active sports fans. If you want to watch or consume, a lot of the sports content that, Yannick was talking about, then there's FanCode.
Right.
Yeah. If you are a fan and want to display your fandom by buying official merchandise, then there's FanCode shop.
Okay.
And if you want to actually experience it and go in and watch it, a game or a match in a stadium, DreamSetGo will play that role. And if you want to play a mobile game or a sports mobile game, a Dream Game Studios probably will be have an answer for you. So I think within the Dream Sports portfolio of brands or companies that I spoke about, the idea is to say that cumulatively, how do they offer more touch point services for the sports fan in the country? And the second bit really is how do we then make it seamless, frictionless, easy? Yeah, because very often fans struggle. If I want to do all of the things that I mentioned, where do I go? How do I buy? Is it cumbersome? Is it worth it? Yeah. So I think there's a lot of product integrations that we are trying to do within our Dream Sports portfolio, externally and internally, which probably will help in this cause. And the third bit really is sort of at a grassroots level. Remember the point I made about what's good for sports is good for Dream Sports, is how does Dream Sports play a role in popularizing or growing or supporting sports at the grassroots level. So for example, the Dream Sports Foundation does its own bit to try and support almost now 7,000 plus athletes. A lot of them are Olympic medal hopefuls right now.
Wow.
And all of them are non-cricket sports, by the way. How do we also do a lot of partnerships with smaller leagues and tournaments and event organizers to make sure that they get a platform in terms of either sponsorships or even a distribution via, let's say, being streamed on FanCode, so that it becomes a good ground for not just talent spotting, for hopefully more sporting talent, but also monetization and bringing more revenue to them. So I think a number of those things that I spoke about are really the broad vision with which Dream Sports approaches things when it's trying to do its own small bit of growing the sports ecosystem.
You know, it's a dream literally to be at the pinnacle of where you are right now and look at sport from the vantage point that you guys are, an immersive experience for fans and, you know, the entire ecosystem, so to say. So that's been an enriching conversation so far about the sport industry, diversifying the culture and going beyond cricket, actually making it an incredibly immersive experience from all sides and all parts of the ecosystem itself. Let's talk about the fun stuff now. Sure. He gave me a great nugget about, you know, the most amount of people who went to the Wimbledon semi-finals came in from Jaipur. That was a great nugget. Let's riff on a few nuggets. Some crazy stat that you found from the data that you guys analyze.
Well, I think we are a very data-obsessed company. You know, I could throw a number of stats at you, but I think, so for example, when we say 220 million users, 55 million of them actually came in just last year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I think very often people assume that, oh, you guys have been around for 10 years, 12 years. But the fact is all growth curves follow a hockey stick curve of sorts. And there's a particular inflection point. And some of that we've started seeing in the last few years, yeah, in terms of growth at Dream 11. The other sort of fun fact and also a very encouraging fact is the growth of women's sports fans. Yeah, we've seen Dream 11, for example, is not only the sponsor of the Women's Premier League, but also offers a number of other sports which are obviously are women-centric. And we've seen almost 80% growth in different sort of formats of women sort of consuming and participating more on Dream 11, you know. So that's the other bit, I think.
What's the split right now in terms of users, men and women? Yeah,
it's, I mean, it's what used to be single digits for women is still is now a high sort of, you know, double digit number. It varies from sport to sport. It varies from event to event. During IPL, obviously, the, you know, contribution of women will start coming very close to even men. But for some other times, it might go down. But the trend is promising, yeah.
You want to give us some more apart from the Jaipur one?
So I think I'll give more in terms of the split that we're seeing in terms of clients. So since our inception, and don't forget that, you know, we started in October 2019, and the first 2 years, pretty much we were slowed down because of COVID. So we've been actively, you know, contributing to the sports travel industry since the last 2.5, 3 years. We've had more than 25,000 people that have traveled internationally with us. 15,000 of those came last year. It was a big year.
Hockey stick.
This year, we're expecting that number to hopefully double because it's a huge summer. It's, as I call it, it's a summer of sports. It starts off with the T20 World Cup, actually French Open before that.
Yes.
Post that, there is the Wimbledon, Silverstone, Euros, and it ends with the mighty Paris Olympics. And the next bit that we are seeing is out of all these people that have traveled, around 60% of them have traveled for cricket, but a huge 40% has come from the other sports. Tennis, F1, and football have led the way.
All right, you got to throw your stat at us.
Yeah, I think for me the most interesting part that we've seen in the last few months, right, and I think it's been an evolution of the last few years, is the consumption by women of women's sport and the consumption of women's sport in general. We stream the Women's Soccer League, which is the equivalent of the EPL from the UK. We've done the Under-17 World Cup, the Women's World Cup in football, the Under-19 Women's Cricket World Cup. We've done a whole lot of hockey events in women, with women starting in it. And what we've seen is that a lot of the consumption of these events, the viewership has actually doubled year on year. And I think one of the main reasons is what we spoke about earlier, is that as more heroes emerge, younger fans, especially young girls, will start playing. And that essentially for me is that in the next 10 years, there's going to be a significant growth in women fans in this country and across the world. And I think that's something which is extremely encouraging and something that we're going to be very, very focused on kind of helping facilitate.
You guys are doing a lot for the sport ecosystem. So final question to you all then, if there is something that, the regulators can do to make it a lot more easier for all of you, what would that be in a sentence, each of you all?
Yeah, so I think, to be fair, there's a lot that, whether it's at the administration level or even at the government level, that is being done in terms of focus on sport. Some of it obviously must be visible to you as well in terms of interest in either the Olympics or even various government sports ministries doing their bit. I think that greater and more frequent interaction and taking the point of view of multiple stakeholders and facilitate that process, I think probably is the way to go. Some of it is already happening, and we are quite optimistic that more of that will continue to happen between multiple stakeholders. Yeah.
I presume in your case, it will be better infra.
No, I mean, I personally think this next decade is going to be the decade of sports in India. India wants to position itself as a strong sporting nation. 30% plus of the cricket is going to happen in India. There are 3 large ICC tournaments. The government of India's vision to host the Olympics in 2036 in India, I think, is a huge stepping stone in that direction. So I feel there's a lot of work that's going on behind the scene. There's constant improvement. The Cricket World Cup, we saw that the facilities saw great change. The experience is definitely improving, and the fan experience is becoming better and better. So I feel the next decade, we'll just make sure that we are as good as the world.
All right, and what about you?
Yeah, I just think doubling down on making India a sporting nation. I think, this is not a 1 year, 2 year kind of phenomenon. As Monish said earlier, this takes decades. So I think investing in our youth, investing in sports at the grassroots level, I think that's something that, both as a sports fan and someone in the sports business, I really look forward for the government to continue doing.
We'll quote the great Sachin Tendulkar, who said that we want to make our nation not just a sporting nation, but also a sport playing nation, apart from just a sport watching and sport experiencing nation. And I'm sure you guys are working towards that ecosystem itself. Right, thanks a lot, gentlemen. Today's discussion revealed Dream Sports' transformative role in broadening India's sports landscape. Our guests highlighted how technology and digital engagement are expanding fan base, especially in Tier 2 and beyond cities, fostering a deeper connection with various sports beyond cricket. The focus on sports tourism and community upliftment shows a commitment to inclusive growth and nurturing local talent. Thank you to our guests for their insights and our audience for joining in this enlightening conversation. We look forward to seeing how these initiatives continue to shape India's evolving sports ecosystem.